to stand.
I'm the only candidate endorsed by the Louisiana Sheriffs and Deputies Association. I'm proud of those endorsements, but the endorsement I want tonight is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Higgins, your 2 minutes.
It's my humble honor to stand before you, the American Patriot voter of the 3rd District, in consideration to be your representative in the halls of power in Washington, D.C. I have been further humbled and honored to stand amongst the gentlemen of distinguished accomplishment who have competed for this seat, including Mr. Angelle, who stands next to me this evening. The decision that you have to make as a voter, as an American, as a patriot, is very clear. We have an opportunity in our country at this time to make some real substantial change. And you will have to choose your voice. You will have to choose the voice of the working class guy, the street cop, the military veteran, the biker, the man that understands your struggle, or you'll have to choose a career politician, and I say that respectfully. So we have, all of us, do we not, crossroads in our life. Our nation is no different. Our nation is the United States of America. We are an assemblage of 50 sovereign states. What you represent as the voter is the ultimate voice for the decision, the direction. What direction shall we take? Shall we continue to send millionaire career politicians into Washington, D.C. and crash this thing further? Or shall we stand it back up with the American working class, the voice of we, the people? I'm that guy.
Thank you, sir. Question time now, and we'll be starting in alphabetical order and then alternate who answers the questions first. Our first question concerns the rhetoric of the campaign and the ads voters are seeing right now on TV.
We got rid of crooked Hillary. Now let's get rid of Scott Angelle.
Trey Higgins, deadbeat, boom, fraud.
I'm going to give each of you a chance to respond to the ads that are out against you in just a moment. Mr. Angelle, you're up first. Watch this clip and we'll get your response on the other side.
Meet our new president. Now meet Scott Angelle. State records exposed, Angelle voted in Hillary's presidential primary. Like crooked Hillary, Angelle gamed the system, grabbing a $380,000 job from a company he was paid to regulate. Angelle also funneled lucrative state contracts to his family.
Mr. Angelle, that ad is out by a PAC called Make Louisiana Great Again. It brings up an allegation of a conflict of interest with your positions with Sunoco Logistics and also on the Public Service Commission. You've addressed that before, saying that there is no conflict of interest. You say that the Public Service Commission does not regulate the holdings of Sunoco Logistics, but if elected, you will be elected to the federal government. And as a congressman, how will you deal with potential regulatory issues involving Sunoco Logistics, especially since you've been paid very well by them, 6 figures, to be on their board?
Certainly, I would say that the commercial shouldn't be called, the PAC shouldn't be called Make Louisiana Great. It should be called Lie Louisiana Again. It is a commercial that is full of lies. There is no question that I've never voted for Clinton and I've never voted for Obama. And it is still make-believe TV coming to a zip code near you to try to deflect from the rhetoric and the service record of my opponent. Now, having said that, with regards to your question, I'm very proud of the oil and gas background that I have, very proud of the service that I have. Clearly, the federal code requires that no one can have any outside income when you serve as a congressional member. So I will be resigning from every job that I currently have now as I serve the people of the 3rd Congressional District. I've answered that question before. It's been litigated several times before in last year's race, and there is not a single shred of evidence that there's a conflict. The reality of it all is that the agency that I serve with now does not regulate the company that I work with.
People who may wonder, was your salary some sort of a deposit if you're elected to Congress? What would you say?
I would say no. I would say it's not a salary. It's a service for a board seat. I'm an independent board member, and I get paid the same exact amount that every independent board member gets paid.
You mentioned that you did not vote for Hillary Clinton, but you did vote in the Democratic presidential primary in 2008. You were then registered a Democrat. Do you care to say who you voted for?
No, I tell you what happened is I showed up on that election day. I went into the ballot box and I looked at the opportunities that I had, and I left a little note that said none of the above.
All right, very good, Mr. Angelle. Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Your turn. Here's one of the ads being run against you by the Love for Louisiana PAC.
On TV, Clay Higgins pretends he's a tough guy, but it's all a phony act. Court records show Higgins owes nearly $100,000 in child support to one of his 3 ex-wives. Another ex-wife had to get a restraining order to protect her from Clay Higgins. Now Clay Higgins is running for Congress, even though he doesn't even live in our district.
Mr. Higgins, the issue I want you to address in that ad is the child support issue. It continues to dog you on this campaign. Yesterday, your ex-wife, who did file a lawsuit seeking about $100,000 in child support from years ago, she posted audio recordings on Facebook, 2 audio recordings. She says it's a phone conversation with you from May. The voice on the other end admits to owing about $100,000 to $150,000 and even brings up campaign money. Your response to those recordings?
So name of that track, Love for Louisiana?
That was Love for Louisiana, yes.
I don't see much love there to you. You know, I'm never going to say a disparaging word about the mother of my living children. You will not angle me into doing that, brother. The allegations against me are civil in nature. They're 11 years old. They showed up the day after Election Day. Now, please, I'm speaking to the viewing audience right now. Sure, they don't think we're that stupid. It's clearly a political stunt. I refuse to stand in front of you and the patriot, respectful viewing public and say disparaging things.
I'm not asking you to say anything disparaging about the mother of your children, but I am asking you, 2 weeks ago, I
The
did ask.
allegations are not true. I've clearly stated that, and we will defend vigorously in civil court. Anyone can allege anything they want to in a civil document.
Let me ask you once again, because 2 weeks ago we sat down for a one-on-one and I asked you, did you ever skip out on child support payments? You said no, sir.
The
You
answer
still
is
stand
no.
by that. You still stand by
The
that.
answer is no. That's right.
Is that your voice in the recording?
I don't know what type of person records telephone conversations, but apparently, perhaps, it's my wife that left me in 1998 for another man. However, I haven't listened to the recordings because, hear me good, Jim, I refuse to descend into that darkness, man. This political realm is bizarre that you folks live in. I'm a working class guy. I'm a servant of the people. I'm a patriot. I'm not going to participate in the darkness that surrounds me and envelops this political system.
Mr. Angelle, 45 seconds for a rebuttal on anything you heard there.
Look, I think that non-payment of child support is a serious issue. I have a tremendous amount of respect for family life. As the father of 5, I have been absolutely present 24/7, 365 as we have taken on the challenge of raising a family. Having said that, I'm not coming before the voters of the 3rd Congressional District and get into the issue of whether or not Mr. Higgins paid his child support or didn't. That's a tough issue that has to be, I think, kind of fought out between he and his family. All I can say, it's a serious, serious issue. And when you hear the report that says, I paid it all, and then a report that says, no, you haven't, I think it brings into integrity.
Very quickly, yes or no, because it has been insinuated that there's a connection between these ads and these attacks to your campaign and your candidacy. Is there a connection?
Absolutely no way. That's comical that you would ask a question as to whether or not our campaign would be responsible for activity associated with the becoming public of non-payment of child support.
Mr. Higgins, I'll give you a minute to respond to anything you heard there.
The mother of my living children worked for Bobby Jindal. Mr. Angelle worked for Bobby Jindal. They all know each other. They're friendly with each other. I will not divulge disparaging things about the mother of my living children, but I could I choose not to because I'm a gentleman. I've always supported my children. I continue to support my children. My adult children to this day depend upon my support, and I provide it.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Next up, viewer-submitted questions, and we start out with two voters whose questions are echoed by so many on social media.
I think the citizens of this district would like to know, since both of the candidates are Republican, what distinguishes one from the other in this particular election?
Is it going to be politics as usual, or are they going to really try to help the people of the state of Louisiana?
Mr. Higgins, you're up first. Here we are, two Republicans with us tonight. What's the difference between you two?
An established, wealthy, career politician that was born into a respected Democrat family versus a working class street cop born into a conservative family. And I have to say that the differences between us are so clear regarding what type of voice the voters and patriots of the 3rd District choose to have. What kind of a difference can we make? What sort of a struggle can we represent? What sort of a voice shall we speak? The young lady asked, will it be politics as normal? Let me address that. I will be beholden unto those who send me into office. But those who send me into office will not be the wealthy, the large donors. There will be the working class patriots from across the country who have sent small donations, $10, $15, $20, $50 to fund our very efficiently run campaign. I have a great humble responsibility to respond to the confidence and the love, the prayer that's been given unto me as I step into this realm, this political realm, and I intend exactly to be the voice of the type of young lady that just asked that question, a working class lady, a working class American that understands real struggle.
Mr. Higgins, thank you. Mr. Angelle, politics as usual, yes or no?
Well, I think the first question was whether or not, what was the difference between us? And I would clearly say, from my standpoint and from others I've heard across, it's results. I'm a Washington outsider that has produced results here in Louisiana. One only has to take a look at my local record and my state record. In local government, I changed the whole form of government. I brought about an accountability and a transparency there. While I was there, I lowered my salary. I expanded business hours. We did some remarkable things and became the 3rd fastest growing parish in the Caribbean. When I became Secretary of Natural Resources in 2003, the drilling rig count was up in Texas, it was up in Oklahoma, it was actually up in all of America, but it was simultaneously down in Louisiana. That meant that people were investing in the industry, but not in our province. I went to work, I made a list, I checked it twice, and during my time, we had a 182% increase in the drilling rig count. Why is that important? It's not important to the shareholders of Chevron or Exxon, but it's important to folks here who often can't go anywhere in the world to be able to get work. I'm very proud of the results that we delivered in that. When the BP oil spill happened, and the White House had an overreach and tried to shut down drilling in the entire Gulf of Mexico, I was the point man who was sent up to D.C. to push back. And we took a 6-month moratorium, compressed it into a 4.5 moratorium, and did some amazing work getting people back to work. This is about results. There's change coming to a zip code near you in America as a result of the November elections. Let's make sure we get some of the positive change we need for the industries here in Louisiana.
Mr. Angelle, thanks. Mr. Higgins, 45 seconds.
I've been assured that I have seen some important committees that will affect and influence jobs and the economic growth of South Louisiana. My voice will be loud and clear. I have a tendency to be heard. When I speak on the halls of power of Washington, D.C., when my voice is heard, and I'm speaking to you, the working class voter of the 3rd District, when my voice is heard, your voice will be heard amongst the halls of power of Washington, D.C. You must choose whom you think will deliver the most powerful and passionate message that you have to deliver.
Message there, Mr. Angelle, you have 45
Yeah,
seconds.
I would just, in response to that, talk about the powerful message. The powerful message that he talks about is that for the last several years, he's been on Crime Stoppers TV calling out people for criminal behavior when he, in fact, has here today, even today, according to the recent allegations, participated in behavior that hurts Louisiana families and Louisiana children. And that's not what we need. What we need is someone who can take advantage of the change that's coming to a zip code near you. Again, when we take a look at sugar and rice and oil and healthcare and veterans, we need someone who can represent our folks and do it in a way that can bring the change that we so much want here in the 3rd Congressional District.
Our next 2 questions come from social media, and for those questions, we turn to Marcel Fondo. Marcel?
Thanks, Jim. Our first question is about jobs. Wesley Lemaire wants to know, what will you do to ensure that jobs stay or will be brought back to Louisiana? Thousands of Louisiana workers have lost everything after working their backs off for a long time. What will you do to help those folks, including oil workers, get back on track? Mr. Angelle, you first.
Great question. When you think of jobs, we have to fundamentally understand that government doesn't create jobs, but government can create policy that allows job creators to then deploy capital. What is clear to me is that we've gone through now is a decade of overzealous regulation that has led to job-killing opportunities here in this state. One only have to look at the George Mason University report, the McCain Institute, that says that Louisiana is 72% more impacted than the baseline state when it comes to federal regulation. We are the most impacted state in the union when it comes to federal regulation. And when you take a look at the jobs that we have here, primarily in energy, in healthcare, in navigation, in agriculture, that period that we went through, this overzealous regulation, has made such a dramatic impact, such a negative impact. So we have to begin to push back in the first 100 days. We have to push back on regulation. We have to change this idea that Washington knows everything and that every good idea comes out of Washington. That's not true. And I will be a voice that will be pushing back on this regulatory scheme that we have now had to endure for the last 8 years.
Mr. Higgins, 2 minutes. How would you get jobs back here, or how would you bring them to Louisiana?
First of all, the voters of the 3rd District have to send a man into Washington, D.C. that understands what it is to sweat and have a job. I certainly know what that is. I understand struggle. I know what it is to work for 2 weeks and bring that check home to my wife and determine, do we pay rent or buy groceries, because we can't do both. I understand struggle. The overreach of Washington, D.C. and the federal government is certainly something that Mr. Angelle and I agree on, practically parallel. Our founding fathers established the House of Representatives as the most powerful segment of our federal government. It's the people's house. We face great peril now as a nation, a $20 trillion debt. The complete overreach of federal government that had established an entire 4th branch of government, the alphabet branch. How? How has this manifested itself? Why? How have we allowed this? The voters, we, my generation, have allowed this to happen by turning the people's house again and again and again, election after election. We've turned the people's house and voice over to millionaire career politicians, posturing themselves for the next election or lining themselves up for the next larger gated community. If you want to be a representative of the American people, then understand what it is to struggle as a common American. I am that guy. Jobs are certainly at the top of all of our list, and I understand what it is to sweat with my labor, the toil of my brow, and have a real job. $380,000 to go to a board meeting a few times, it's hard for us to get our heads wrapped around that when we sweat for our living.
Mr. Angelle, 45 seconds to rebuttal.
Sure. Mr. Higgins makes you believe as though he is the only one in the 3rd Congressional District that has sweat. I am the son of a conservative dad who owned a business and required us to get up every day and go to work and to do the things that American families do. We got woken up on Saturday morning. We were told that we had to straighten rusty nails to make certain that we understood the value of reuse and conservatism. I certainly have had my share of hard knocks as well. As the father of 5, I stayed and I showed up every day when those tough situations happened. So to Mr. Higgins, who believes that he is the only one in the 3rd Congressional District that's worked, that's not true. I have worked in my family, I have worked with our family in agriculture and in business as well. And it's not showing up for a board meeting, it's the responsibility of leadership. And I'm very proud of my work in the oil and gas industry because I believe that we have shown that we know how to create jobs.
Mr. Higgins, 45-second response.
I would defer to Mr. Angelle's wisdom as he stated that he comes from a family that understands work. But I would decline his statement that I'm positioning myself as the only person that understands work. My voters understand work. My base understands work. My supporters understand that their mission was not over on November the 8th. It ends on December the 10th when they send another working class patriot into Washington, D.C., rather than a millionaire career politician.
I want to jump in. I don't know where he gets the story of a millionaire. My wife and my kids would be shocked to know, among all of those used cars that we have with 150,000 and 200,000 miles on them, that I'm a millionaire. That's not true. That's a lie. He knows it's a lie, but it's not unusual for us to have these lies. Again, he sat down with the news media and said that he had made all of his child support payments. Yet, a report now comes out yesterday that he had not made them all. He actually called his wife to say, hey, don't let this come out because it could have
Mr. Angelle, we must move on to our next question now.
We need to make sure
Our
that
next
we are
question.
responsible for.
Our next question from social media is about entitlements. Crystal Broussard wants to know, what do you plan to do about welfare, disability, and unemployment systems? And what do you plan to do to help people in the system stand on their own with pride and dignity? Mr. Higgins, 2 minutes.
55% of the money that we send of our treasure, and it is our treasure, to the federal government, is dedicated to welfare programs, entitlement programs, and Social Security. Now, we are a nation that should have welfare programs, entitlement programs, and Social Security. We must take care of our truly needy, those who truly need a hand up in life, our sick, our mentally ill, and certainly our elderly, our revered elders. We are a compassionate, loving nation. We've proven that by our history. The problem is not the existence of these programs. The problem is the waste and fraud out of Washington, D.C. Once again, because we've continued one after another to send wealthy, could we just agree on wealthy, career politicians into Washington, D.C. The size and scope of our federal government, the massive bureaucracies have become leviathan in proportion in our federal government. They devour the people's wealth and tread upon the people's freedoms. The reason we have sustainability problems in our entitlement programs, Social Security, and welfare programs is not because these are not deserving programs. It's because 67 cents of every dollar is spent on the bureaucracy of the massive size of the bureaucracies that govern these things.
Accessibility shortcuts, 8 items. Voice guide off.
Put this thing back in. We must greatly reduce the size of the fourth branch of government. We have to put power and control back in the people's house, and we have to put people back in the people's house.
Mr. Angelle, 2 minutes. Entitlements, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that we need to understand that fundamentally people will do what you pay them to do. And we in this country have gone totally out of bounds, and we have allowed people to get paid for doing nothing. One only have to take a look at a statistic that shows last year we had in Louisiana alone, 60,000 able-bodied, childless adults on food stamps, yet the Louisiana Workforce Development website, we had 60,000 job openings. Now let me tell you what that is. 60,000 able-bodied, childless adults. If you're able-bodied, you're not disabled. If you're childless, you have no children. If you're adult, you're over 18. Folks in that category, 60,000 of them in Louisiana receiving food stamps, Yet, according to the Louisiana Workforce Development website, 60,000 job openings. Now, I understand that not every job on this list is going to qualify for one on this list, but we've made it too easy in this country to stay home as opposed to going to work. So welfare reform needs to include work requirements or education requirements. And one of the things I think that we can do is also recognize that in this country, not everybody needs to go to college to be a productive citizen. You don't have to have a 4-year degree to be a productive citizen in this country. You can do other things as well. I think we need to celebrate and elevate our skills jobs and those kind of jobs that I think can help our economy. I'm aware of the job openings that we have in this state that require those kind of skills as opposed to a 4-year degree. But we need to invest in that, and we need to make certain that folks are not allowed to stay home. There has to be a requirement to either be seeking work or going to school to get new skills.
Mr. Higgins, 45 seconds to rebuttal.
We have roughly 50 million Americans that live below the poverty level in our country. From the national, state, and local level, we invest as a people about $1 trillion a year in social programs to help these folks. That's $20,000 per person. You ask any one of them, they don't get that money. This money is wasted at the federal level, once again, because of the massive size of the bureaucracies that govern these programs. We have to be much more efficient, like my campaign has been efficient. We spent less than 200 grand. I'm told we ran the most efficient, successful congressional campaign in modern history. Our federal government should reflect that sort of fiscal restraint.
Angelle, 45-second response.
Again, I believe that people will do what you pay them to do. We have trapped people in a generational poverty situation by not requiring more. We need to raise minimum expectations is where I think we need to be. And I think that we can do that through welfare reform that requires folks actually seeking work or actually seeking additional educational opportunities to be well employed.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And before we take a break, a few rapid-fire questions tonight.
Candidates answer quickly with the first thing that comes to mind. First, your dream job, Mr. Angelle.
To be a father.
Mr. Higgins.
What was the question?
Your dream job.
My dream job, to serve the people.
1 year into Governor Edwards' term, how is he doing on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best? Mr. Higgins, you're up first.
I would say he's doing his best and a poor job at it.
Mr. Angelle?
I think he's not doing a good job. I think that we have not focused on reducing state government, and I think the fact that we are now going after oil and gas companies in a litigious way has not been a good thing.
This question, yes or no, legalize recreational marijuana, Mr. Angelle.
I'm opposed to recreational marijuana. I am in favor of medical marijuana.
Mr. Higgins?
Simple possession is already decriminalized. I do not support legalization.
Candidates, thank you. And this marks the halfway point of tonight's debate. Don't forget to join in the conversation online using that hashtag KATC debate.
And we'll be right back with more from the candidates right after this quick break.
I'm going to fast forward. Mom, you taking care of the kids, okay?
To be back at
Third Congressional District.
You're watching KATC TV3.
Welcome back, everyone, for the second half of our third Congressional District debate between Scott Angelle and Clay Higgins. Our next question comes from the New Vision Leadership Foundation of Acadiana. It's an organization for middle and high school students on the north side of Lafayette. Here's the question.
With the tightening budgets in education, how are you going to creatively support programs like this that are developing our youth for our future?
Mr. Angelle, the floor is yours first. 2 minutes.
Certainly our youth are our future. We need to invest in them. Let me make very clear that I believe from an education standpoint, especially in the K-12 program, the responsibility of that falls on, those decisions fall on the state and the local leaders. I believe that a congressman should fight to bring back dollars and give those dollars, grant those dollars, block grant those dollars, if you would, to the school boards of the various parishes here, and let them decide on what they believe is the best way to empower the kids. I do not believe that a one-size-fits-all approach from Washington, D.C., where we're creating programs only to have those monies kind of ate up in the bureaucracy. It seems to me that the important thing for us to do to improve educational opportunities is to take federal dollars back from Washington, D.C. and block grant them to the various parish school boards and allow them to implement the kind of programs that they see fit. I absolutely believe that government that works best is government that works closest to the people.
But even if it is a state issue and at the state level, what suggestions would you offer? Because it seems every year education is being cut.
Well, I certainly believe that we need to make some structural changes in our state budget. If you're talking about from the state standpoint, the reality of it all is that about 85% of our state's general fund goes for three primary purposes: education, medication, and incarceration. And we seem to be tied to our tax structure is tied to energy. As so goes energy prices, so goes the opportunity to invest in this state. We've obviously got to take a look at our entire state budget, and we've got to get rid of things that we ought not be doing. And I think there's a lot of tax breaks that were put on the books over the last several years that have not provided the kind of benefit that I think we ought to have.
Mr. Higgins, your 2 minutes. How would you support education programs?
First of all, the federal government should have very, very little to do with education. Decisions about curriculums in school and how our children are taught should be determined by loving parents and dedicated teachers. Common Core is the worst idea in the history of bad ideas, even by federal government standards, and they've had some terrible ideas. The very fact that our the contents of a child's lunch bag could be determined out of Washington, D.C., rather than by their mother or father is just ridiculous. As a congressman, I will support every measure to reduce the role of the federal government in our local schools. Let's talk about treasure regarding our education system. Investment of our treasure as an American citizen is always more efficient when it's kept closer to home. At the local, municipal, and state level, we're much more efficient than we are at the federal level. And decisions are closely made according to the needs, the parameters, the struggles, the requirements of that particular environment of that community, that school community. This nation was founded on local schools. I'm a product of public schools. I understand the struggles of current parents. I'm told with backpacks that they can barely lift, with homework that they cannot understand because of the ridiculous involvement of the federal government in our local schools.
Mr. Angelle, anything you heard there that you'd like to respond to?
Well, it certainly seems like he's adopted my policy when it comes to education, getting the federal government out of the K-12 space. I've been a strong opponent of Common Core. I was against it on its first day. I continue to remain against it. It is silly in my mind that we would have a Washington-based standard that would be pushed down to the various states. So I'm glad to see that he agrees with me.
Mr. Higgins, he's saying you've adopted his views. Fair?
Well, that's the kind of thing the politician says, isn't it, going into debate? We have parallel views, nothing wrong with that. Mr. Angelle is an intelligent gentleman. He has a conservative viewpoint on this particular question, as do I. So it should be no surprise that we have similar viewpoints.
All right, on to our next question now. It comes from Chris Harrison, who's a student at UL.
After this election, the country seems more divided than ever. What can you do as a member of Congress to ensure that the polarization that exists in the country is alleviated as much as possible?
Mr. Higgins, you're up first with 2 minutes. This is a question about bridging the gap. How can you do that?
I have personal experience here. I speak across the country to large law enforcement gatherings on constitutional issues, the racial divide between the badge and the citizens who were sworn to serve and protect, unwavering recognition of civil rights, the sacred duty of the badge. I've advised, spoken from my heart, man, for thousands and thousands of my brothers and sisters of the Thin Blue Line across the country, across the South, Texas, Florida, Arkansas, Connecticut, Alaska, California, about the oath that we swear. And that oath is not to a sheriff or marshal or to a chief of police. It's an oath of allegiance to the constitutional principles that our badge is supposed to represent. So the young man asked a question that's in all of our heart. How have we been convinced in our nation, where our families reflect every shade of ideology, how have we been convinced as a nation that we're divided along lines that were long ago erased. The Constitution has the answer, my friend. The Constitution is blind. As a constitutionalist, conservative Republican, I recognize the fact that constitutional principle serves us all. And by adhering to these constitutions, by having honest, solid, non-PC communication across the board about the challenges that face our nation regarding divide, including racial divide, we can deal with these things as a brotherhood of Americans.
Mr. Angelle, your 2 minutes.
Yeah, look, I think we need to recognize that we are a divided country, that we have gone through a period that has now resulted in a recognition that we want different things and we want it a different way. But I think that we can begin to move forward in a way that's better by, first of all, establishing a tone of that has nothing to do with meanness or hatred or racism. I do believe that it's okay to want different things. I think it's okay to disagree on how we're going to get there. But I think we all, in a leadership spot, must do it with the right kind of tone, with the right kind of bedside manner. As we are working with folks who may not particularly agree with our position, our job is to try to convince them to see it our way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that we have a divided country in terms of some of these issues, but I do think that we can best solve for some of these issues by having a better tone.
Mr. Higgins, for your rebuttal, you touched on law enforcement. There's been a major divide between law enforcement and minority communities. How can you mend that relationship?
With honest, solid, non-PC communication. We have a duty, those of us that wear the badge, we have a duty to begin this conversation based upon constitutional parameters. Again, our job begins with an oath. As a congressman, I will support every measure to encourage honest, solid, non-PC communication between the badges that protect our country, and we're 1 million strong, and the citizens that we're sworn to serve and protect.
Mr. Angelle, another 45 seconds.
Well, I certainly would say that I was excited to be endorsed by the deputies of Louisiana, of the 3rd Congressional District, I should say, who believe that I have what it takes to bring about the conversation for change when it comes to this. One of the things that I certainly strongly believe in is community policing. Again, I think when we decentralize government and we bring it away from Washington to Louisiana and then to the various parishes and then to the various cities and the zip codes, I think we do a better job. So I will be a proponent of trying to bring the dollars from federal government to our local law enforcement officials so they can embrace community policing. I believe that good relationships are like a good bank account. You got to make some deposits to make some withdrawals. And I believe that we need to have more of our police officers out there actually visiting with the folks that they serve.
All right, thank you. And now we're going to give the candidates a chance to ask each other a question. The candidates will have 90 seconds to respond. We are not allowing time for rebuttals in this segment. And we'll start with Mr. Higgins, who's posing a question to Mr. Angelle, and the time will start when the question is finished. Mr. Higgins, your question.
My question to my friend, and I call him my friend because I respect and love my fellow man. Although Mr. Angelle and I differ in many ways, we're still Americans. We serve the same country. We respect the same Christian principles. So I'm going to give him an opportunity to ask a question or to answer the question that has been posed so many times. And I ask you respectfully, sir, to give you an opportunity to address this from your heart. Why did you not endorse David Vitt?
Thank you for that opportunity. I didn't endorse anybody last year when I ran for governor, but I do appreciate the fact that you told me you voted for me in that governor's race. Now, having said that, I believe that I had a hard-fought battle last year, and I worked very hard, and I took my name and my policies across the state of Louisiana. And in so doing, God had a different plan for me. And God told me, no, I'm closing this window. That's not where I want you to be. And I got together with my wife and my daughters. And we made a decision that we would all decide on how we would move forward, but that is a family. The one thing that we had, the one thing that we inherited from, I inherited from my parents and they from me, was our name and our word. And we got together and we prayed about it, and we thought it would be best that we absolutely just leave it up to the voters. I think endorsements are overrated from politicians. I don't believe elections are won from the top down. I think they're won from the bottom up. I'm very proud of the way that I handled myself in that campaign with dignity and class, in spite of some very, very tough issues. I'm very proud of the way he did it. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my daughters for the way that they spoke up with me in that situation. I respected my wife and my daughters at the end of the day.
But why not vote? Some may be watching at home saying, I'm not going to vote for either of you. What do you say to voters like that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I believe that...
But why not vote?
Well, Mr. Higgins decided not to actually vote in the governor's race. He's asking me why I didn't endorse. The public record is very clear. He actually did not go to the polls and vote on that particular day. So I do believe that it's important for people to vote.
All right. Mr. Angelle, your turn to ask Mr. Higgins a question, and once he's finished, Mr. Higgins, you'll have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins talks about him being very efficient with the amount of money that he had for his campaign. He fails to acknowledge that for a long period of time before that, he had the opportunity to be coming into you live in your living rooms across Acadiana, and that certainly earned him a great deal of name recognition that then allowed him to not have the need for as much money in a campaign. Having said that, tell us what allows you to get on television and what many have called now, based on the recent allegations of not paying taxes, not voting, not paying child support, what allows you to get on TV and to be a hypocrite and call people out for criminal behavior when still today you are participating in that criminal behavior?
Well, first of all, thank you for your gentlemanly kindness. I'm not participating in criminal behavior. I've never participated in criminal behavior. It's a very ugly world, this realm that I've ventured into, this political realm where men will say and do anything to gain your vote, promises made, betrayal, corruption, sweetheart deals. I'm not a participant in that. I've never, ever violated a departmental policy. I'm a highly decorated and respected cop across the nation. I didn't ask my sheriff to become the public information officer. He asked me, and I was promoted within the course of 1 year from corporal to sergeant, sergeant to lieutenant, lieutenant to captain. I am an order follower. In fact, I'm such a devoted, dedicated soldier that I sacrificed my job when I resigned on February 29th of this year rather than sacrifice my principles because I could not follow orders that were completely contrary to my conscience as a man and my core principles of the man that I have become.
And Mr. Higgins, you stand by saying you've never violated department policy?
That's exactly correct.
All right, sir, thank you. We'll head back to Marcel now for a social media question.
Thanks, Jim. This question comes from Cody Dunstan. Now he writes, I want you to be nice for a moment. Name one positive thing your opponent would bring to the table if elected. No rebuttals for this question. We'll start with Mr. Higgins. You have 2 minutes.
I would say that the kindest thing I can say about Mr. Angelle is Mrs. Angelle. You know, what a blessing it is for each of us to have at this time in our life loving, supportive, encouraging, patient wives that understand the struggle that we're in. Listen, this is not an easy thing, man, this political realm. I'd pretty much rather be having live rounds fired at me than what's has happened over the last few months. But I think Mr. Angelle, respectfully, would bring a certain familiar political knowledge to the table about how to navigate the political realm. I don't reflect that. But then again, you know, I'm not posturing myself. I live a very humble life, and I intend to continue to do so. I am a servant of the people. I believe that Mr. Angelle will also be a servant of the people, but in a different way. I'll let the voter determine that.
Mr. Angelle, 2 minutes. The positives if Mr. Higgins is elected.
Well, you know, I certainly would
We're trying to keep it
agree
neutral.
with regards that the
on
gift
the video.
of a great spouse is an incredible gift. And I have been married to the same woman for now
He didn't
some
answer
30
the
years.
question,
I love you, Diane. I love you for what you stand for, the integrity and the honesty that you stand for, standing by me as we've gone through this journey together. And so I certainly would echo that. And I haven't had an opportunity to meet Mr. Higgins' family, but I certainly would reach out to his family and say congratulations for standing by your man as well. Having said that, what might happen if Mr. Higgins, what good thing could come out of Mr. Higgins being elected to Congress? I think a couple things. I think when we take a look at Louisiana's dark political past, there's been some concerns about whether or not public employees receiving cash for getting paid on the job. We need to bring more attention to that. That would be something I think that we could bring more attention to. I certainly believe that the non-payment of child support by public employees would be something that would perhaps take center stage on a national spotlight. And we might be able to get some policy reforms as a result of that.
All right, and now more rapid fire questions. These also came from some viewers using the hashtag KATC debate. Please limit your answers to just a few words. First up, I want to ask you both about the Affordable Care Act. President-elect Donald Trump says he wants to keep some features. Do you? And if so, what? Let's start out with Mr. Angelle.
Look, I believe the American Affordability Care Act has been an unmitigated disaster. I don't think it's worked. It had two goals. Those two stated goals were patient-centered health care and lowering costs. Both of those goals have failed miserably.
Would you keep anything?
Well, what I would do is I'd work with the president. I do believe there are two things that the president-elect has said that are worth taking a look at. I think it needs to be repealed and replaced. What I think it would be replaced. I don't think we need to keep things. I think we need to repeal the entire thing and start all over. The two things to me that make sense are opportunities for folks getting coverage for pre-existing conditions and making certain that 26-year-olds can stay on mom and dad's policy.
Mr. Higgins, what would you keep?
I agree with those two things to keep. I like the pre-existing condition clause, and I like it that we're able to keep our kids on our policies while they're in college or until they turn 26. But I think the entire, other than those two factors, the entire Obamacare plan needs to go straight in the garbage can. It doesn't have to be replaced with some massive new law, some new 28-page, psychobabble that takes an army of attorneys that still can't figure out what it says. Obamacare can be trashed and replaced with market principles. All we have to do is remove the federal restrictions that stop insurance providers from selling insurance policies across state lines. This will vastly improve the availability and increase the market competition, therefore decreasing the prices of policies. Within a year, if we did this, buying health insurance would be just as easy as it is for us to buy auto insurance.
Moving on to our rapid fire questions. Taxpayer money for Planned Parenthood, yes or no, Mr. Higgins?
No.
Mr. Angelle?
Absolutely not.
Next up, are you in favor of adding protections for gay and transgendered individuals in anti-discrimination laws? Mr. Higgins.
That's a complicated question. On the surface, I would say that's a states' right issue, and I would support the right of any state to reflect the will of its people from popular vote regarding an issue of that nature. I don't think the federal government has anything to do with that.
Mr. Angelle?
Certainly the federal government has no business in that, but I would be opposed to additional measures. The reality of it all is that discrimination should never be acceptable, but at the same time, our religious freedom should never be negotiable.
And finally, on a much lighter note, Raging Cajuns, McNeese Cowboys, or the LSU Tigers, Mr. Angelle?
New Orleans Saints with that question.
Mr. Higgins. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you for ending with a question like that. When they call me the Cajun, John Wayne, but I went to LSU. However, I'm actually a Cowboy, so that's a very difficult answer. I would have to say I'll go with my LSU Tigers.
Thank you, sir. And now each candidate will receive 2 minutes for closing statements, the order determined in a coin toss just before we got started here tonight. Mr. Higgins, you're up first, 2 minutes.
I thank you all very much for allowing me the opportunity, not just to be here in your studios for this debate, but to remind America that we are a nation of 50 sovereign states, and that our government was created to serve the people, not the other way around. We have an opportunity in the 3rd District at this time to send a true voice of the American people into the halls of power. The House of Representatives is the people's house. You are the people. I do reflect your voice. I do understand your passion, your struggle. I can deliver your message, and I bow my head as your servant. The 3rd District has a very clear choice, and I'll say this respectfully to Mr. Angelle. The choice is, do you send a working class patriot into the halls of power, or do you send another wealthy career politician? I have 1 million followers across the country. I have a very loud voice, tendency to be heard. When I speak upon the floors in the halls of power of Washington, D.C., when my voice is heard there, your voice will be heard there. I thank you all very much for your love and your prayer. I've been so humbled and so uplifted for these last 6 months. His will be done by your voice. Thank you again.
Mr. Angelle, your 2 minutes.
Sure, thank you. I certainly want to address the issue about a career politician, because when you stop and look at Clay's behavior over the last several years, it kind of smacks at everything we hate with the career politicians. Taking cash under the table to avoid wage garnishments. Not voting in 60% of the elections over the last 10 years. Not even showing up. I was kind of raised in a family where we had a bumper sticker. Honor a vet today, vote. He chose not to do that in 60% of the elections over the last 10 years. And not taking care of his family and lying about it to a reporter, and then having a tape saying we can't have this to come out. It's really, to me, what a career politician is all about. It's, I get to do it my way, and then I get to deflect and try to make you believe something else. What started off as a feeling for many Americans, perhaps a decade ago, has now become a reality. The reality of it all is that most of our parents and grandparents don't even recognize the America that we've inherited from them. In a short period of time, we've gone from a country that used to wave veterans to the front of the line. Now we make veterans stand in the line. We used to be a country that always thought that police officers were part of the solution. Now Washington vilifies police officers as part of the problem. We spent much of the month of May debating guidance that we got from Washington on what bathrooms little boys and little girls ought to go to in our public schools, as though we are not capable of handling this business ourselves. That's evidence that there's just way too much Washington in America. It's time to fight back, and I'm ready. I've distinguished myself in that fight, in the fight against overregulation. I've pushed back on accepting the way we do things today, just because that's the way we did things yesterday. I've focused on making government work harder and work smarter. I will be a congressman that gets up early, stays up late, and never, ever stops fighting for Louisiana. I'm a Washington outsider. I'll never bow down to the political insiders and the establishment. I will work with President-elect Trump and the Republican majority to get things done. I'm proud to be endorsed by the NRA. I'm proud to yesterday have received the endorsement of the Independent Petroleum Association of America, a group of 20,000 leaders in the oil and gas industry who believe I am the right voice.
Thank you, sir. We are out of time, and this concludes tonight's debate. Our thanks to Mr. Angelle and Mr. Higgins for joining us tonight.
And also a thank you to all of you who submitted questions online using the hashtag KATC debate. Don't forget, polls open Saturday morning at 7 and close at 8 p.m. KATC will be everywhere Saturday night, bringing you the complete election coverage on air, online, and of course on social media.
Thanks again for watching. Have a great night.